If you watched the previous video about writing an equation of a square root graph, this is going to seem very familiar to you with the cube root graph. And if you didn't watch it, I recommend you go back and watch it. So, once again, I'm given that vertex number, that starting point or that center point, we called it for the cube root graph. And recall that those values represent our h and our k. And then this random point they've given me for the graph is going to represent x and y. So I'm going to go ahead and take all four of those values and plug it into the form we have for a cube root graph. The only value we won't know is a, and that's what we're going to try to find. Same thing we did last time, it's just got a cube root this time. So let me go ahead and do that. So our y value was -3. That needs to equal, we don't know that a value, that's what I'm trying to find, times the cube root, make sure that gets in there. Our x value was 63. Our h value was a -1, and recall that that always has to change signs. So the -1 will become a +1 in my equation, and then finally that k value is what it is, a -2. Everything's been plugged in then except for a, which we don't know. I should be able to find it. So let's go ahead and go through that process. So -3 would equal a times the cube root of 64 once I add those values together. And once again, they've been nice to me because the cube root of 64 is an integer. If I didn't know that, I could double check on a calculator, but the cube root of 64 is just 4. So I'll write that part as 4 times a instead of a times 4. And then -2. And finish solving from here like you'd solve any other equation. So I'll add 2 to the other side. And then divide by 4. This time it doesn't divide out to be an integer, but that's okay. We can have an a value that's a fraction. So I get -1/4 as my a value, meaning my graph must have been reflected because of that negative value. And also it must be compressed because it's a value less than 1. Not that they asked, but there's some bonus information for you. Don't forget to finish the question, though. They didn't want to know what a was, although we did have to find a. They wanted the equation of it, so let's make sure we answer that question. Equations will always have y and x in them. So I'll say y equals -1/4. That's the a value that we finally found after all this, times the cube roots, don't forget the 3 in there, of x plus 1. We'll have our vertex number in there, our starting point, and then -2 for our h and k values. And like we said in the last video, a really easy way to check these problems is go ahead and graph that on your graphing calculator. Go to your table and check that the points -1, -2, and 63, -3 are both points in your table.